The following is a presentation of the Mat Talk Podcast Network.
You are now tuned in to the PA Power Podcast, featuring Jeff Upson and Eric Knopsynder. PA Power Wrestling. PA Power Wrestling. Pennsylvania is wrestling.
What's going on, wrestling fans? You are now tuned in to the PA Power Podcast. I'm your host, Jeff Upson, joined as always by my co-host, Eric Knopsynder. And Eric, we're just a few days out from the start of the season, and I'm pumped. We got Media Day coming up on Sunday, hosted by PA Power Wrestling up at Pitt Johnstown. We got the season basically underway next week on December 8th and 9th, where most teams will start kicking off their seasons. And I'm super excited. We just released the top incoming freshmen, so I really can't wait for this season to start.
We've got the top incoming freshman report released. I think of that like Groundhog Day for PA Power Wrestling. Jeff emerges from the hole that he's been in for the past couple months, just feverishly preparing the top incoming freshman report. Instead of a 6 more weeks of winter, though, you give us a forecast of who the state champions and state place winners are going to be. Well, the first thing that you look at it and you're just like, my God, the amount of work that you put into that, Jeff, with how you compile so many things. It's one thing to put together a list of who the top kids are going to be, but for anyone who hasn't seen it, Jeff has just so many placements where these kids have finished in PJWs and, youth tournaments throughout the country, in freestyle and Greco. I mean, just so many things that you have on these kids, a complete bio on a lot of these guys. And to put that all together, I just can't imagine the amount of time and effort and digging that goes into getting all that information.
And yet I still miss people. It's hard, it's hard to get, make sure you hit everybody. And especially in today's day and age where you're not sure if someone's only in 8th grade or 9th grade. But I've been fortunate enough to have a lot of good resources across, the nation and state to find out information on wrestlers. But it's a daunting task. I mean, I'm very relieved when it's over. I mean, I can't wait to release it because it's such good information. But at the same time, I'm happy that it's over and that I can focus now on getting ready for the season. But yeah, I hope the fans enjoy it. I think they will. And, this year, especially a lot of big names, some under the radar names. It's interesting, Eric, because this is the 7th year in a row I've done the top incoming freshman. And, this year it seems like there's not as, an amount of big names that we're used to. Maybe in years past. I don't know if that's because we were spoiled for a couple years with names like Spencer Lee, Luke Pletcher, Gavin Hoffman, Sammy Sasso, Michael Beard, just huge names that were coming up through the ranks. Sammy Hilligas, Bo Bartlett last year. Not taking anything away from this group of individuals, but in terms of depth, and you look at the name recognition, I guess you will. I don't know if 2018 is going to prove to be, have a harder time adjusting to high school or not. I'm not sure.
You talked about how many years have you been doing it now?
Officially, this is the 7th season that I've actually done something involved with the top incoming freshman. It started out with just listing and not really doing the whole in-depth type of thing. But I would say the last 5 years have been in depth, actually looking at all the results throughout. So it's evolved.
Yeah. How has it come? I mean, from that first year when you looked at it, I'm sure it's evolved from there. The amount of effort and material that you put into it.
Yeah, it's grown in numbers. I think the first year I did was like 20 or 25, something like that, and it was only listing, and then it got into a little bit more. I think it was the first year was I really got into the results was like Luke Pletcher's year when he was the top incoming freshman. Hayden Hidley is in that class, and I really do feel like I've improved not greatly, but I have improved in terms of getting guys, especially like the top 10. I mean, it's hard after you get from 20 to 30 on, to really rank them, but it's not so much about where you fall on the list. It's being on the list, because with youth results, it's so tough to judge because wrestlers are competing at different weights. They may compete at 45 one year, then 70 the next, and they're facing completely different wrestlers. And I'm looking at freestyle, Greco, and folk style. So a wrestler may do really bad in freestyle because it was the first time ever wrestling freestyle. So, I have to take into consideration a lot of different factors and components when trying to compile, the list, if you will, the ranking. But overall, I mean, it's a lot of digging. It's a lot of digging for results.
Well, and whenever you have a ranking, is this how you think that they're going to perform this year? Is it all based on past accomplishments? Is this how you think they'll progress throughout their career? I mean, what do you look at in terms of, okay, this is what the number one guy means? Is it just results, or is it where you think he'll be as a freshman or as a senior, or how does that go into it?
That's a good question, Eric. And I've had a lot of people ask me this question before, and really it's a two-part answer. The first one is recognition for the achievements from the youth standpoint. So that's I would say, if we're weighting this, if we would like a test, I would say that's 60% of the weighted score goes into the accomplishments that you have to this date. So everything that you've done from the time you started wrestling to the time I'm putting out the report, those accomplishments are taken into consideration, not necessarily where I think you're going to go. So that other 40% is how you're going to transition into high school and, where you're going to go your first year and really your just career. So 40% of that is looking at your trajectory, where I think you may end up. But 60% of that is really just based on recognizing your youth accomplishments and that pre-high school wrestling, that ability and those accomplishments that they've come across.
So 60% hard data, 40% crystal ball.
Yeah, I think that's a fair analysis. Is 40% that crystal ball? And a lot of that is. I mean, I don't want to give away my secret formula that I have, but a lot of that is based on the program that you're in, your workout partners. I mean, it's no secret that we see programs that are bringing in 2-3 top incoming freshmen, and they're going to be with each other for the next 4 years. And when it's all said and done, those guys are going to be making each other better every day. Not saying that the wrestlers that are coming into programs without those other talented young stars doesn't mean they're not going to compete well, but it's just there's a whole lot that goes into it. But I have several different components that are evaluated when looking at it.
Well, and that's one of the things that I find most interesting in looking at it. When I first get it, I kind of glance, not even so much the list. You look at some of the top guys, but I also like how you break down, which schools have the most in there and which districts. And those are some of the things I kind of wanted to talk about, like looking. Easton. Are they going to be our team champs in 2022 with 5 guys on the list?
I don't know if it's we're looking at that crystal ball again. I don't know if they're necessarily going to translate into a team championship, but I mean, you look at it. So I'll give you an example. The first year that I did this was the year that Michael Kemmerer was actually the top incoming freshman of that year. I forget what year it was, but you had Josh Shields and Josh Maruka. Now that year, I did say, this Franklin Regional team, now this is before Spencer and before Devin Brown, and I said this Franklin Regional team is going to be tough. Now, obviously, you add in some more firepower, and that was clear as day that was going to happen. But I'm not saying those were 3 high-quality guys, all 3 Division I wrestlers right now. One was a national All-American. The other one was both were national qualifiers for Arizona State. So clearly that was a different circumstance. Easton's definitely looking better. I mean, clearly they had Jonathan Myers last year, was a state qualifier. He was high up on the list last year, and then they're bringing in a bunch of I think solid names coming in throughout the freshmen and top incoming freshmen to add to an already decent team. So, but
So maybe not state champs, but at least a resurgence and kind of what we were used to for a long time out of Easton.
Yeah, and I don't think Easton's never really went away per se, but they definitely
no, but they're not quite at the level probably that they had been.
I mean, yeah, there was years when everywhere you looked there was an Easton wrestler. I mean, it was the Red Rovers everywhere. There was just tons of them, at the state tournament, in the state finals, on the podium. So yeah, I think we are seeing a resurgence in the sense that we're going to have some more wrestlers that I think are going to do well for the Red Rovers and Coach Billman. So, but then you have other schools like Springford or Seneca Valley that aren't really, I guess you would say, historical powerhouses, but they're certainly strong programs that have quite a few wrestlers coming in.
Yeah, and whenever you've got, each of those schools has three wrestlers on the list. And so I think that, obviously bodes well for the future of them. And it's good to see some of, we love to have the traditional powers like Easton and Reynolds in Double A, which has 4 guys on the list. But then again, it's nice to see some of these other programs kind of building toward that level and, possibly getting into that upper echelon, in a few years.
Yeah, and there's a ton of, the one thing I love about the Top Incoming Freshmen is, one, knowing who I miss, because after every season there's a glaring hole in saying, like, how the heck did you miss that guy? And it's like, well, Jake Woodley, for example. Jake Woodley was not on my radar whatsoever coming into high school, and turns out to be a 2-time state champ, and then, unfortunately there's some wrestlers that are I wouldn't say hyped up, but they're, they've done really well in the youth, and it doesn't translate. They have a mediocre high school career, which it's not a bad thing, but that sometimes happens where we see that. But another thing that I really love is seeing the depth of this, the disparity between different programs. So we have some, like you said, with 5, 4, 3 wrestlers, but then you have others with 1. But those are long ranging. You have just a spread out area of wrestlers that are coming into the Top Incoming Freshman Report from all over the state. You have small schools, big schools. You have schools without wrestling teams. You have it's really a diverse group of wrestlers from different areas.
And the other thing that I like to look at is the district breakdown. You have, how many kids are on the report from each list. And I found this kind of surprising. It doesn't surprise me that the Whippy's leading the way, but they have 29, which is more than twice as many as any other district. How does that compare to years past? Is that a much bigger gap than you've seen in years past, or is that similar?
I think it's probably one of the wider gaps. I don't have the numbers right in front of me to crunch them to say, they've always had, I guess clearly because I have a Whippy bias, apparently, right?
Either that or because it's the largest conference in the state,
right.
in the country.
I don't know which one it is, right? I'm not from here. I live here, but apparently I have a bias. But no, the Whippy definitely this year really stuck out with how much depth they had. But in years past, it's always, I don't think there's been a year where District 7, the Whitfield, didn't have the most. But you look at a district like District 4, they have 13. That's to me, I was very surprising to see that District 4 has 13 when, that's tied for second in the number of top incoming freshmen across the districts. And District 6 right up there.
Yeah, those two surprised me. I would have guessed, just historically that it's going to be District 7, District 11, that most of the time it's going to go that way. But as you said, District 11 is behind both District 4 and District 6. So, again, this is one of those things where, I'm not ready to say that it's a changing of the guard by any means, but, interesting to see these other districts kind of catching up to District 11, at least in this regard. Now, we know the coaching talent and the systems that they have in place in District 11 and how some of those guys that might not make the list are going to be at the top whenever you look at this year and on down the line. But still good signs for those Districts 4 and 6 that they have some young talent coming up.
Yeah, and especially District 4, when I saw, just because you look at the AAA side of it, they have 4 teams. That's it in AAA. And, we're not historically seeing those large of numbers for the top incoming freshmen for those areas. District 3 had a down year with 9. Again, this is all crystal ball sort of, thinking, and in 4 years, this may just be, prove to be fake news. I don't know. But at the end of the day, this is a really diverse group of wrestlers from across, many different parts of the state. And, last year we saw with Wyoming Seminary, they had a huge incoming class. Now we only had one on the list from Wyoming Seminary. Same with Becca. Becca had a huge incoming class last year. They only had a few this year. So, but do they necessarily need them? Probably not. I still think they're probably going to be the favorites in AAA, even without those loaded, talented freshman class.
Now, as far as the national preps go, only 3 this year. That seemed a little low to me. Do you think that is historically, or is it because I know, like you said, last year it seemed like Wyoming Seminary had a ton on their own, but just 3 for national preps. How does that compare, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, it's a little bit lower than in years past, and I've been trying to make sure I get all the wrestlers that are Pennsylvania wrestlers wrestling in the national prep. Couple of years. Last year we had Ryan Miller from Blair. We had two wrestlers from the McDonough School that are from Chambersburg, Cody Williams and Jack Wimmer. They're from Pennsylvania, but they wrestle in other prep schools. So it's a little bit lower this year, but I think it's just a trend that is the way it is.
Okay. Now, as you said, this is the 7th year of it. You've pretty much nailed the number ones over the years. But those were in a lot of cases guys that were maybe not household names as they were entering their freshman year, but they were certainly known commodities. Any pick over that time that you're especially proud of that you ranked high that might not have been a huge name going into it?
Not necessarily. I mean, like you said, all the number ones that I've had are pretty much been spot on. But I would say that's pretty easy. I mean, the fact that we had Luke Pletcher, Spencer Lee, Julian Klebov, guys like that. I mean, then again, we had Gavin Teasdale and Sammy Sasso. They were in the same class. Michael Beard and Gavin Hoffman were also in that class. That was a deep class. This year, I mean, you look at the top, and Cole Rees, who we're going to talk to in a little bit. Cole Rees is a very solid wrestler. Is he Spencer Lee? Is he Luke Pletcher coming in? No, he doesn't have the accomplishments that they have at this point, but that doesn't mean he's going to be less likely to be successful. And I said this when I wrote a little bio on him, is he's going to have big shoes to fill with the names that have, I hate to put pressure on a 15, 16-year-old kid, 14-year-old kid to say, man, you're really talented. But it's always fun to look ahead and see who's going to, make some noise.
Yeah, and you brought it up earlier. Woodley, is he your biggest miss that you look back and you say, man, how did I not get that guy? I mean,
not necessarily. I wouldn't say it was a miss because if you looked, and Jake would tell you this, if you looked at his accomplishments coming into high school, I mean, they were. He didn't deserve to be on the list coming into high school because he was just a mediocre. I mean, he was a good youth wrestler, but he wasn't. He didn't have the accomplishments that, he did when he left high school. I mean, he qualified more for Fargo than he did for States. I mean, he's an anomaly in the sense that, he just grew and got so much better exponentially over the last 4 years that he, I wouldn't call him a miss in the sense that he should have been on the list. He's just someone who was overlooked and he just got better. I mean, he said, you know what, I don't care what PA Power Wrestling says about this, list. I'm going to be really good. And, he was 500 his freshman year and then ended with 2 state championships. So, no, but there's definitely been some guys where, I looking back and I'm like, how did I put him so low? Like, why, how did he get, like Cole Matthews one year, he was into like the 30s. Jarrett Lane was up there, and I'm thinking, how did I put those guys where they're at?
But again, as we're talking about, I mean, it's hard to tell what a freshman is even going to look like as a senior in high school, let alone how he's going to progress athletically and just kind of adjust to everything that goes along with being a top wrestler. So it is a pretty difficult thing to look at and say, oh yeah, this guy's a surefire, and this guy, he's kind of mediocre. He won't amount to much. So I don't envy you in trying to put this list together. And then I give you credit for having the guts to look back on it and say, okay, well, how did I do?
Yeah. And I always, every year at the end of the year, I always put out a how did they fare report on the top incoming freshmen, because I'm completely honest. I mean, I'm not like Mel Kiper. I don't just run my mouth and then, he's like the Easter Bunny, right? He just appears and then he's gone, right? I'll come back and say, missed this guy like Hunter Katka last year, state qualifier, 220 pounds, missed him. I mean, he should have been on that list. And, I always go back and look at how did they fare? Did the top guys perform? Did they, someone really surprise you? And looking at the depth of where we finished in terms of freshmen, because if you look at the numbers of how freshmen have done, I mean, last year alone, you look at 47 state qualifiers that were all freshmen, 17 were state medalists, 9 national prep qualifiers, 5 national prep medalists. That's pretty incredible when you look at the numbers. And, all those wrestlers, majority of those wrestlers were all on that list.
Well, and that's one of the things. I mean, we talk all the time about the depth of Pennsylvania wrestling and how incredibly deep it is. So that really speaks well to these freshmen being able to go. And some of them, yeah, I'm sure a percentage of those were 106, 113, 120. But then you get those guys like Katka, that are doing it as 220 pounders. And so you look at it and it really speaks well to how well they're doing to be able to reach those lofty heights in Pennsylvania as a freshman.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate because I know like upper weights tend to get overlooked in this report just because, you have a decent youth career, but you're going to be going in against 17, 18-year-olds at heavyweight. How is your body? What's the maturity level like of your body? To really compete against those guys. I mean, Thomas Haynes is a perfect example of that. He was a freak coming out of junior high and was able to come out and win 4 state titles at a weight that it's hard enough for a senior to win. So that was pretty incredible to see. And then lightweights. I mean, this is a lightweight heavy sort of list, just because of the fact that they're going to be competing straight away at 106, 113, those lighter weights where it's a little bit younger of a crowd in competitor wise. But, it's always fun because it's someone's always going to surprise you. Someone's going to, jump out and say, man, how did you miss him? And I can't wait to find out who that is this year.
Yeah. And diving into this year, how difficult, okay, you've got your guys that are going to be on the list, but to actually rank them and put them, is there like a tier system that kind of broke down this year and you say, okay, these 3 guys or these 5 guys, I know are at the top. I just have to figure out, who's in which slot.
Yeah, I tend to, because when it starts out, I start out by putting them like buckets. I put them in different tiers of and that's based on their level of competition. That based on PJW, PAWF, any national tournaments that they've been in. So those wrestlers get broken down, and I normally have 10 to 20 that I know are just they're you can't miss them. They're going to be on there. And then it starts whittling down to say, okay, well, the top 5, I didn't get the top 5 until probably 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks ago was probably when the top 5 was actually solidified. And then it really started rolling from there. So what I do is I compile all the data first. I always compile all the data in alphabetical order for the wrestlers, all their youth accomplishments, and then I sort them. And then I sort them into tiers, into different groups. And, this group here, this top 10 here, they're going to be the top 10, but in what order, I'm not sure yet. Maybe this is the middle of the pack. This is 20 to 30, 30 to 40, whatever it may be. So I always start, I never rank them until the end. And that's where it gets real fun to look at, matchups and different things and youth accomplishments. And, some championships hold more weight. I mean, that's just the way it is. I mean, it's hard to win a PJW state championship, especially when you're competing in the junior high division. Just because a guy's won a bunch of youth tournaments, youth PJW state championships, but what about the guys that are wrestling in PJW junior high and they're winning, both years they're doing really well. So there's a lot to go into it, and I'm probably crazy for doing it, but I hope it's worth it.
I'm sure, everything I've heard, people just absolutely love it. I know before I was even working with you, when I first saw it, I was like, wow, this is something I need to get every year and, have to help me prepare for what I do. But As far as this year goes, we've talked a little bit about Cole Rees being number one, and you said that he doesn't have quite the list of credentials yet that the past number one guys had. Was he a clear-cut choice this year, or was it pretty difficult to look at it and say, okay, he's one, or maybe Zach Whitmer should be, or how was it in your mind as far as him being the number one guy?
Yeah, it was definitely tighter than it had been in years past. I think there was the top four or five were they were all considered. They were all heavily looked at to see which one was going to be the top incoming freshman. And this year, I think it was a lot closer. I mean, Brock McMillan and Zach Whitmer are very, very accomplished wrestlers. There's wrestlers on here with multiple PJW state championships that aren't in the top five. So I'm looking at a few things, and like for example, Cole Rees, the fact that he went from Cathedral Prep to Wyoming Seminary, he's at a weight that I think he's comfortable at, and his body and his I think he's mature enough to compete at the middleweight division there, and he wasn't a knockout, clear cut number one. Last year, Bo Bartlett and Sammy Hilgis were basically, that was a dogfight. But either one of them could have been 1 and 2. It doesn't matter. But then you had Garrett Nyhouse and Gage Garcia that were clear number 2s and or number 3 and 4. So this year with the top 4, I would say they were all a little bit closer. And I think all 4 could make an argument to be in the in top 1. But I think Cole Rees, just this level of maturity and the way that he's been competing the last couple years really sets him out. But Zach Whitmer, like you said, another very tough. I mean, I feel like that guy's been around forever. I've been seeing Zach Whitmer's name on results for a long time, and he was a guy who, the last 2 years, I was like, wait, so is this guy gonna be a freshman or not? Because if he was a freshman, last year he would have been top 10. So it's. Some of these guys, I have on the list, but they get recycled because they're not going to be freshmen. So a lot of these guys were on the list last year, but they got recycled because I found out, okay, they're actually only 8th graders or something like that. So I'm very familiar. So it's kind of a good way, because like right now I have guys that are only going to be in 8th grade this year, but I already know they're going to be in a certain tier. If that makes sense?
Yeah, definitely. And that's one of the things, and I think you touched on a little bit before, that it's not about just how many PJW titles you've won, but kind of how you've won them, how you've progressed, things like that. So is that why a Cole Rees with one PJW title ends up ahead of a 3-timer in Zach Whitmer?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a combination of things there that you look at, but Cole Rees has just been, he's been highly regarded on the national scene. He was a Tulsa Nationals champion, which Tulsa's a really, really tough tournament. He's done well. This last year really set him apart from me. Last year I would say, maybe top 10 for Cole, but this last year really solidified it for me, the way he competed. He went in December, he went undefeated down in Virginia at the VACW duels. Then he won a Powerade championship and then a PJW Tulsa championship. I was very impressed with the way he wrestled his last year of pre-high school. So, and then obviously when I found out he was going to Sem, that helps a little bit, just in the sense that, Seminary's known to just continue to groom these wrestlers and make them, just continue to grow their abilities. Coach Scott Green does a phenomenal job of just taking these really good youth wrestlers and turning them into, solid high school wrestlers. So that helps as well.
Right, and just so listeners understand, that's not a bias that, Jeff likes Wyoming Seminary, so he's putting this kid higher. That's factual, that, they do really well, and he's got a room where he can work with top-level guys day in and day out and continue to improve. So that's, it's really a factual thing, that being in an environment like that gives you a better chance to succeed than maybe someone in a room that isn't quite as advanced.
Right. And it's just, I don't mean to come off as like biased, but but that's what makes a guy like Thane Lawrence so special, wrestling for Frazier. And you're like, wait, what? Where did Frazier come from? And, he's wrestling in clubs, but for him to do that, is pretty incredible. And that's what makes him special, is the fact that he is a smaller school. And that's what I like to see Springford and Seneca Valley. I mean, Seneca Valley, they're going to be really good this year. And I don't know if we touched on this or not, Eric, but, the team that it benefits the most, you talked about Easton. I think for this year is Seneca Valley. Seneca Valley already returns a very solid lineup. I mean, Louis Newell is a 2-time state runner-up going to Pitt. They have a lot of guys that have over, 20-plus wins last year. And then they're bringing in a few guys that are really going to make some noise. So I think if you look at it, if Seneca Valley would have gotten a nice big upper weight, they would have done, they would have been sitting real pretty, but they're already doing very well for themselves. And, I think it's nice to see, a program like Seneca Valley doing so well.
Yeah, and just going back for a second, you talked about Frazier and, kind of people saying, who's that? I think the same thing was probably said a year or two ago about St. Joseph's Catholic.
Sure, yeah.
In District 6. They were a school in kind of the same scenario as Frazier, where they had a couple kids on the roster and have been going to tournaments only, not wrestling dual meets. And now you get a couple kids in there, and they're looking like they really have the foundation to be a really solid program in the years to come. That list, of course, headed by Zach Whitmer this year.
Yeah, and we've talked about that, and last year was really that big year when they, Caleb Dowling was definitely the front runner there, and you had just a really good list of wrestlers that were coming into that program, and Zach Whitmer's only going to add so much more strength to that program that's growing. So, and Eric, did you inform me that they are going to be wrestling some duels this year? That's correct, right?
I think that they're entered in one dual meet tournament, so I'm not sure how that will work out, if they'll be available to wrestle in the postseason duels or not. But I think they are getting closer to that, where they're, looking to fill out a lineup and actually be able to be pretty competitive. And obviously if they fill all their weights with guys like that, they're going to be pretty good. But so I think they're moving toward getting a dual meet team. But most of their schedule right now still consists of tournaments, individual tournaments.
Yeah, and that's an interesting. We had a first this year for the top incoming freshman in 2018. The first time we had a wrestler that's not on a team that's going to have a wrestling team.
Who's that?
Logan Harmon. He goes to Apollo Ridge, and Apollo Ridge does not have a wrestling team. I think 2 years ago was when it dropped. He's a really good football player for Apollo Ridge, and he was a state PJW state runner-up last year, 167 pounds. In fact, I talked to his mother last week because I was like, "Hey, I just want to verify that Logan's at Apollo Ridge and they don't have wrestling." She's like, "Yeah, that's correct." Not sure what he's going to do. So, I don't know if they're going to have a co-op or because I know that they're, I would assume Kiski. I think Kiski area would maybe be the closest. I'm not 100% sure, and I think I heard something like that. But here's a guy who's he comes in number 44 on the top incoming freshman, and I had to put NA next to his district and class because I don't know what he's going to do. I mean, he may not compete in the PIAA because he doesn't have a school, which to me is very, very unfortunate. And just a solid.
Well, maybe he goes the Carlton Hasselrig route and gets a one-man team.
Yeah, right. And I said that. I said, or Ian Edenfield from Laurel Highlands.
Laurel Highlands
is the only wrestler in that team. I don't know if I'm assuming that's allowed if he's able to do that, but. I think his mother, when I talked to her, she was sort of, saying like, I don't really know. I'm going to have to ask the athletic director and figure out what exactly. So, I mean, like I said,
I'm surprised that it got this far and they hadn't figured that out. You'd think with a kid of that level, they'd have been, wanting to know that pretty early on.
Well, I think he's primarily a football player. I think, football is his number one sport, but wrestling, I mean, clearly he was a PJW state runner-up. He's pretty decent at wrestling as well. And I think he could definitely do well, sort of at an upper weight. He'd be about 170 in that area. But what's stopping him from going to a private school in the area? I don't know. So something's got to be figured out where if he wants to wrestle, there's no reason why he shouldn't be able to. Is that?
No, absolutely not. Yeah.
But it's interesting. I love looking back. I'll sometimes go back and look at, the 2013 or 14 incoming freshmen, and, looking back at, some of the names, you're like, man, I can't believe how well they did, or, how bad I ranked them here, so, but it is what it is.
Yeah. And then you got, just kind of looking at the top couple, you got Brock McMillan, who's from Glendale, which I'm sure a lot of people across the state are going to be saying, what's Glendale? Because they haven't been much of a power in the past. So I'm interested to see what Brock can do. This is another District 6 school. And I know a few years ago I was told by someone whose opinion I respect greatly. He had told me at that point, he said, hey, watch out for Glendale in the next couple of years. They've got some really good young kids that are going to be really strong. And obviously Brock McMillan is at the head of that group.
Yeah, he's definitely a guy that I've had my eye on for a while. And, I have to admit, I was like, Glendale, man, is that 5 or 6 at first? And I looked, and it's like they didn't have a state qualifier since 2003. That's a long time ago. So to look at it and say, Brock McMillan come into a program, you talk about a program that's not historically tough. You're looking at a team that, it hasn't had a state qualifier in over 10 years. So, but he's going to start a resurgence, I think, with a lot of, Glendale wrestlers coming up through the ranks.
Yeah, I think you're right there. I think Billy Dubler has things headed in a good direction for Glendale.
And I'm hoping, Eric, we get to talk to some of these freshmen this weekend, because it is Media Day. Media Day's coming up on Sunday. I'm really excited about it. It's our second annual Media Day, and we've invited all the teams from the area in and around the southwest, northwest region, and I'm hoping we have a good turnout.
Yeah, Glendale, one of the teams that has confirmed that they will be there. So we'll get to talk to Coach Dubler in person. And as you said, hopefully Brock, look at some of those guys that are ready to make some noise and kind of put Glendale on the map.
You want to talk a little bit more about the Media Day, Eric? I mean, this is something that you and I came up with to really, solidify PA Power Wrestling and really just show that, we're trying to grow the sport and, highlight and give attention to wrestling, because, year after year we talk about the lack thereof of coverage of wrestling. And this is a perfect opportunity for wrestlers and coaches to be recognized. And, we bring together local media outlets from the area. And as I said, this year, we're not limited to, you don't have to be in District 6 or District 7. If you want to travel from Scranton to Pitt Johnstown, be my guest,
Yeah, absolutely. Sunday, December 3rd, 1 to 4 p.m. We've kind of tried to stagger the schools that we know are coming, but anybody that wants to show up, we'll talk to you. We'll find out about your school, your guys. For me, I work for a newspaper also, and I cover wrestling. So it's a great thing for me because I can get all these guys in there. I snap some photos, take some head and shoulders shots so that if a kid does something during the year and we didn't happen to have a photographer there, we have that on file. We can use that. You and I, last year we were able to get video, talk to a bunch of different kids, do some interviews, get some stories out of it. It's great, a great thing for both of us. But then, as you said, we're also working. We're not trying to monopolize this and say, okay, we're just going to keep all these guys to PA Power and me for my newspaper, the Tribune Democrat. We said, hey, look, we want to grow the sport. We want to get the word out about wrestling and try to get it some more publicity. So we've invited, we have a couple TV stations that are going to be there. They're going to be doing some interviews, hopefully get some information about the sport out that, traditionally wrestling doesn't get a whole lot of TV time. So if we can bring together, a couple state champs, a couple state runners up, some team powers and get them some TV time, all the better for the sport.
Yeah, I'm like I said, Eric, I'm really looking forward to it. The Pitt Johnstown facility is super nice, and we're gonna have a lot of, fun. We're gonna have some fun. You're not gonna sit around and just, look at us filming people. We're gonna have some games. It's gonna be interactive. it's, we're maybe being some head shaving. I don't know. We're gonna
we're still working on that. I'm not sure. There's some other factors that might go into that one.
So
I'm not sure how much fun they're looking to have there right now. But
this is a decent segue into that sort of story, Eric. If you want to brief us on what's going on with that situation, Bishop McCort.
Okay, it's been a few weeks since we've done a podcast. So in that time, a lot has changed for Bishop McCort, which kind of stormed onto the scene last year as the third place finisher in Class AA after Anthony Walters and Josiah Jones, both state runners up. Carnell Andrews and Caden Cassidy at the time, both state place winners. So, did really well in their first year as a program. Now, Andrews, Walters, and Jones had all gone to Bishop McCort before, but wrestled with Westmont Hilltop as part of the co-op. Well, last year, McCort launched their own team, made a big splash by hiring Shad Benton, who won a Division II national title at Pitt Johnstown, and, a great wrestler in his own right. And so he came in, did very well. They didn't have quite the depth to be a dual meet power, but did very well, obviously, individually to finish third in the state and looked to build on that. Well, Caden Cassidy, who I mentioned took third last year, ended up moving back closer to his home, and he's going to Chestnut Ridge now. And so they've lost a little bit from there. But the big news came out a couple weeks ago whenever District 6 put Bishop McCort on probation. There were a couple different charges that other schools brought up. One of them being that Bishop McCort was trying to recruit some kids. They were actually younger kids. They weren't at the varsity level, but Bishop McCort was placed on probation, the wrestling team for a year, and all of the sports departments for a year. So it ends up being 2 years for the wrestling team, but they could possibly, if they do everything right, get that year taken off, so it would just be 1 year total. But at any rate, that came out a couple weeks ago, and then just on Tuesday, I was able to break the story that Bishop McCort has actually gotten rid of Shad Benton after 1 year. He is no longer going to be the coach there. They're now going to be coached by Tom Smith, who doesn't have an extensive wrestling background, but was the head coach at Richland when a guy named John Rizzo came through there and won 3 state titles. So Tom Smith has had some success there in terms of what he was able to do overseeing John Rizzo's career. And the interesting thing is that John Rizzo, who just graduated from Pitt last year, is actually going to be the co-head coach with Tom Smith. So big changes there. And as I said, going to get to talk to John Rizzo for the first time in a while at the media day. Just got confirmation today that he will be there along with several of the Bishop McCort wrestlers. So sort of a quick update there on a lot that's been going on in the school from Johnstown.
Now, Eric, are you surprised by this? Are you surprised that this all came out and that, people were held accountable and things happened? Are you surprised?
Yes and no. I mean, I've been hearing for probably more than a year that, these rumors about, Bishop McCort's doing this, Bishop McCort's doing that. And my response was always, hey, if you've got some information, come talk to me, sit down. You want to tell me something on the record? That's fine. But most people didn't want to say anything on the record. They'd say, oh, well, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to put my name to it. It's like, I'm a journalist. I can't put something out there without attribution. It has to be attributed to someone. It can't just be, well, I heard this and, the rumor is this. You can't do that in journalism. That's not the way it works. So I couldn't really do anything with it. I heard the rumors and, again, just couldn't get anything verified. But Forest Hills and Westmont Hilltop actually went to District 6 with some complaints about Bishop McCort. And from what I understand, I believe there were actually some text messages that kind of verified the illegal contact. And that ended up being Alan Andrews, who is Carnell Andrews' grandfather, was actually barred for a year from having anything to do with the Bishop McCort program. So he was the junior high coach. He's not going to be able to be a part of the program, but as I said, since then they've now gotten rid of Shad Benton too. And unfortunately, I haven't gotten to talk to Shad since all this has broken out. We've kind of gone back and forth a little bit, but haven't actually gotten a chance to sit down and talk with him and get his side of it. From Bishop McCort, it was just kind of a blanket statement saying that that Tom Smith and John Rizzo would be the head coaches. So not really much as to whether this, I'm assuming that it all stems from the violations and what went on there. But again, I can't really confirm any of that because nobody's really spoken as to what was said in the reasoning for the dismissal.
Now, talk a little bit about those probation. I mean, what does that really entail? What is that? Because I've talked to a lot of people who said, well, that's not going to do anything.
No, nobody really knows what it entails. When I first talked to Bishop McCort about it, they didn't even know what it entails. Basically, they're going to have to, I think, report to District 6 and saying, this is what we're doing, this is what we're making improvements on, this is what we're telling our coaches, making sure they understand what they can and cannot do. So there was a lot of ambiguity there as to what the probation actually means. Fortunately, for the kids' standpoint, it's not barring them from any kind of matches or postseason or anything like that, which I think everyone that I spoke with, even the people who raised the issues, said, look, we didn't want the kids to not be able to wrestle. It's not Anthony Walters' fault. He shouldn't be punished. He shouldn't be kept from going for a third straight appearance in the state finals, or Josiah Jones or any of these kids. I mean, they didn't do anything wrong. So to punish them would have been pretty heavy-handed. I think this was the district's way of saying, look, we're not going to pretend this doesn't exist, and frankly, I've heard complaints about other schools in District 6. As I understand it, there's nothing going forward with it right now, but I keep hearing, about these complaints from public school people about a private school that is potentially doing something wrong. But again, without any kind of attribution to that and anybody that wants to go on the record, you can't really do much.
It's interesting, Eric, because I think yesterday or the day before I saw an article about Northern Lebanon head coach Rusty Wallace Jr. He's suspended for 2 weeks for letting a recent graduate in the high school room. I mean, this is insane.
And I'm not nearly as close to this situation as I am to the one in Bishop McCort. Northern Lebanon's a couple hours from here. But just reading that article, I mean, come on.
I agree with
the whole thing is ridiculous. To me, it smells like somebody from another school who was upset that Northern Lebanon did really well last year, and they don't like it, so they're looking for something to get them in trouble for. And they're saying, hey, look, they're doing this. This isn't right. Do you know how many schools in this state have former wrestlers come back in for 1 or 2 practices a year and just, come in and roll around a little bit? I mean, come on, it's wonderful for a program. If you're fortunate enough to have an alumnus who is wrestling in college, you absolutely want that guy coming back. You want him to come back, first of all, to say, look at this kid's from here. He's able to succeed here. He's able to go on, wrestle in college, look up to him, follow what he does. He should be who you're trying to emulate. And so it's a wonderful thing for them. Second of all, it gives the kids that are in the practice room a chance to wrestle around with somebody who is really good and somebody different. So, I mean, I think the whole thing's ludicrous. I understand that the PIAA, it is for both football and wrestling, that you're not allowed to have guys come back and practice with them. I guess the feeling is, well, you don't want a senior in college coming back and working out with a freshman and somebody getting hurt. I get that, but I like to think that our coaches here are much smarter than that and are going to keep an eye on it and make sure that they're saying, hey, look, don't take it too rough on the guy. You're not wrestling a college kid here. Roll around with him, show him some things, and, let him look up to you.
Yeah, the whole thing to me is pretty insane because, every program, every notable program in Pennsylvania has a guy who comes back for Thanksgiving or Christmas break and they need to work out, and they are, where do they go? They go to their high school and they wrestle and they help out with, guys that they were just wrestling 6 months ago. It was okay to wrestle them 6 months ago, but now that you're out of high school, it's not okay. And to me, it's really incredible that, someone like Rusty Wallace, who is a very respectful person. I know him personally. He's a good person and a good coach, and he does everything for the right reasons. And, for him to be punished for something that, a lot of people are doing, and the benefits, I think, far outweigh the disadvantages such as liability. I mean, I understand the liability portion. I understand you just don't want anyone coming in the room without being vetted, and you don't want. I understand all that, but at the same time, we're talking about guys that just graduated and they were literally just wrestling the same people less than a year ago. So, it's pretty incredible.
Well, and I guess what the PIAA says is that they have to be listed as volunteer coaches, which I do understand this. I actually ran into this a couple years ago. Somebody came in and asked me to do it, and I did have to get listed as a volunteer coach in order to do it. But, I mean, it's whenever you're talking about 1 or 2 times a year, as you said, a college kid coming back over Thanksgiving or Christmas break or something, to expect them to go through the hoops to become a volunteer coach is probably not realistic. And the other point that someone else raised to me that I hadn't thought about is, what about the club setting? You know, you can't tell me that these kids aren't going and rolling around at a club with some of these college kids. So, you know, it just... To punish a respected coach, as you said, like Rusty Wallace for this, I'm really disappointed in it.
Yeah, Eric, and I agree with you. I mean, it's kind of a shame that it's come to this, knowing that most teams and schools in Pennsylvania have a guy or two that are coming in over winter break and wrestling. They've been wrestling there for the last 3 or 4 years, and now they're coming back to just wrestle and really help that program. So it's kind of it's a sad story, especially to a guy like Rusty Wallace. But before we get off on too big of a tangent, because you and I could talk about this for quite a while, let's bring on Cole Rees, who is our top incoming freshman for this year. Cole's going to be our guest on this show, and Cole's a freshman at Wyoming Seminary, was just named the top incoming freshman by us at PA Power Wrestling. So he's got big shoes to fill. But I'm looking forward to talking to him and looking forward to seeing him competing this season. Joining us now is Cole Rees, the top incoming freshman from the class of 2018. Cole, how you doing?
I'm good. How about you?
Good, Cole. And, we were just talking, Eric and I, about, the pressure of being that top incoming freshman. When you look at some of the names on that list, you got guys like Luke Pletcher, Spencer Lee, Gavin Teasdale, just legends in their own right already. When you were named the top incoming freshman, were you proud? Were you thinking, man, that's a lot of pressure? What was going through your mind?
It's a really good company to be with. I mean, just seeing those names and me being next to it, it's pretty cool. I'm not really going to look into pressure on it. Just going to try and focus on what I have to do this season.
Now, Cole, we got to see you at the PJW tournament. You looked obviously solid there. That was when you were competing out in Erie. You were a very accomplished youth wrestler. You were always competing. What was it for you to go to SEM? Because that's a huge move for you. You're basically going across the state there. What was that like?
I mean, it kind of all started a couple years ago when I wrestled Bo Bartlett in the second round of states, maybe 2-3 years ago, somewhere around there. I talked to his dad there a little bit, and then it kind of dropped for a while. And then last season around Northeast Regionals, I started talking to them again, and then I shadowed there, and I really liked it. The academics are really, really good, and the wrestling there is obviously phenomenal. So it was just a really good fit for me.
What's the adjustment been like for you to be in SEM? Because, I mean, you're like you said, you're in one of the best rooms in the country. What's that like?
The adjustment's been a little bit, I adjusted to it pretty quick. Living without your parents, living with a lot more freedom. It's a lot to handle for a high schooler. But as long as you just stay on task and everything, I've been doing pretty fine by myself.
You just had your first competition, is that right?
Yeah, we had our first duel on Tuesday.
So you were named top incoming freshman. You get a pin, and you celebrated a birthday too, right?
Yeah, I had my 16th birthday on, I think, Tuesday. Yeah, Tuesday.
So that had to be pretty cool, right? You get a win.
Yeah.
You get your name's out there. A lot of people are talking about you. With the top incoming freshman list. People are wondering who you are and what you're going to do. And when you're looking at the schedule for SEM, because obviously you're looking at some of the best competition in the country. Is that something you embrace and you just say, yeah, I want to wrestle the best?
Yeah, I'm looking forward to all the big tournaments this year. We got, we're going to Lake Norman duels in North Carolina this weekend. We're leaving tomorrow. Then we got Ironman next weekend, Powerade, preps, all our duels. I'm looking forward to the schedule.
And that's got to be pretty exciting for you. Just, we saw Bo Bartlett last year. He came in and, won the Ironman, was third at the Powerade, and obviously won a national prep championship. Is Bo someone you said? I remember that match actually when you guys wrestled. It seems like years ago now at the PJW state tournament. Is Bo somebody? You're a little bit bigger than him now. What's your relationship like with Bo the pro?
I mean, I talk to him and I ask him some questions and stuff. We sometimes drill in the room. We don't have any, we kind of joke around about that match a lot because, it's junior high. It has no impact on now. So it's not like we have hard feelings or anything from that match. But we're pretty good friends.
Is that somebody you can sort of, bounce some ideas off of, considering, he was in your shoes last year being a highly touted freshman and, he, I'm sure, has some tips for you. Is that someone that you kind of look up to in that sense?
Yeah, he shows me some stuff sometimes. And when I wrestle with him, I can really focus on the speed aspect of wrestling. Helps me with that.
And Cole, we were able to travel out to Fargo and watch you compete out there. Talk about that experience for you going out to Fargo and wrestling with some of the best competition, in the nation.
I just started wrestling. I really got into freestyle 2 summers ago, and I wasn't really going to try to go to Fargo that summer. This summer, I really wanted to get more into it. So I decided to go out there. I was training at Bad Karma at Teal College in Erie, PA. And then Mark Steen kind of talked me into going out to Fargo. And it was a really good experience overall. I mean, I kind of didn't come out with what I wanted to get, but I want to go again eventually, hopefully this year.
You take that as good experience going out there and wrestling guys in freestyle?
Yeah, I liked it. It was a lot of fun.
You mentioned Bad Karma and that whole Erie, you talked about Teal College and Mark Steen and that whole group. It seems like that area of Pennsylvania, Bad Karma, just with the prep guys, all those guys coming up, you got Carter Starocki. It's really I would say a hotbed of wrestling. I mean, everyone considers Western Pennsylvania, the WPIL real tough, but Erie's got a really strong pipeline. I can remember watching Steve Spearman and some other guys from that area wrestling. What's it like growing up in Erie and wrestling in that kind of environment, that area?
I mean, we've had a lot of good guys come up. We may not have the depth that places like the Whippeal has. But we've got some decent guys. There was Carter. There's a couple kids that coming out of prep this year. One I can think of is Panero Johnson. He was another one on the list. Keyshawn Higgins, I used to wrestle with a lot last few years. So I mean, a lot of the guys down there are pretty tough. I grew up wrestling with a lot of them, so yeah, it's pretty good down there.
Is it hard to sort of leave, when you had to go to SEM? I'm sure that had to have been a tough decision for you and your family because, you grew up, like you said, wrestling with all those guys and going to SEM. Is that kind of hard for you?
It was a tough decision to make, but I really like SEM. All the guys here welcomed me in here. So it was rough at first, but I'm pretty happy with the decision I made.
And how long have you been out there?
I've been out here since the start of school.
So about a couple months now.
Yeah.
And talking about adjusting, I know we had Coach Green on a few months back, and we were talking about just how he's really growing you as a person and an athlete. His team, and you really buy into that sort of that mentality that, like you said, you're on your own without your parents. You're becoming mature real quick. Is that something that you've already seen in those 2 months?
Yeah, I mean, we have to focus on, what we have to do. I mean, we have our coaches and our teachers here that we can talk to about anything we need to, but we don't have, we don't have somebody constantly watching us. So, things that we have to do on our own, we just have to go do them. We can't just, we if we decide to hold them off until the next day, things may not get done. So you have to just stay on task and everything works out fine.
You know, I mean, obviously they call it a college prep for a reason. It seems like it's, you know, preparing you for that next step and, you know, that going to college and wrestling in college. Is that something that you obviously foresee yourself doing, is competing in college at a high level?
Yeah, that's the ultimate goal, is to wrestle D1 and, you know, go for a national title.
Now, you know, we had Bo on the list last year, and you know, he definitely lived up and was able to come away with the National Prep Championship. When you look at your season and what you're looking forward to, do you have goals set in mind? Like you want to come in here and win a national prep? Are you just taking it a match at a time? What's the game plan for you?
I mean, ultimately, yeah, I want to win a national prep title, but like I'm going to take it a match at a time. First, we got to win. I want to win team titles this year. I hope we got to beat some of the teams that we got to beat, Blair, Becca, teams like that, and just focusing on getting better this year.
And the team's pretty young. Would you say that the team is overall pretty young?
Yeah, I don't think we're graduating many kids this year. And then we got a really strong freshman class. We have a really strong sophomore class.
Right.
So.
And that's got to be exciting for you because, like you said, you have a really strong sophomore class and freshman class now. And, you know, I'm sure you're looking forward to the next 4 years competing alongside those guys.
Yeah, it'll be fun.
You know, we talked about Wyoming Seminary in another aspect, growing girls wrestling and women's wrestling. Is that that's something that's crazy? I remember I was down at the Super 32 this year, and there was a whole team of Wyoming Seminary women wrestlers. What's that like? That just, I mean, you can tell the program is just very invested in the sport of wrestling. Is that something that you are witnessing?
Yeah, I mean, Sem's really big on wrestling. It's different than most schools. I mean, everybody gets along with the girl wrestlers too, so they don't really cause a problem. We sometimes split mat time with them, and like we can work out with them sometimes. And they joined our preseason a couple of times this year too, so it's pretty fun with them too.
That's got to be a pretty unique experience for you. Just, you know, it's almost like a little college campus of wrestling, girls and guys, and it's got to be a pretty neat experience.
Yeah, it's different, that's for sure.
Looking at the season, I know you had mentioned, you know, obviously the ultimate goal is to win the national prep. Is there anything on the calendar that specifically sticks out to you? I know Powerade, you've wrestled in the junior high tournament there. Is that something that you look forward to because you're coming back out this way, closer to home? Guys that you grew up with wrestling are also competing in that tournament. Is that something that you're sort of looking forward to?
Yeah, that's probably one of the major things that I'm looking forward to wrestling in. Powerade is just, I get to go home. Probably some of my family members will come there because it's only a 2-hour drive. So that'll be fun.
And what's the weight situation like? Because I remember when you were a lot lighter. You know, I can remember. I think it was a few years ago. You may remember this. I gave you Charlie Lennox's state championship shirt. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I remember that.
You were like no more than a $110. You were small, right? And now all of a sudden you're like your voice is deep and you're like 160 pounds. You know, you're pretty filled out. What happened? You just grew up real quick?
I guess I just hit a couple growth spurts and just got a lot bigger. I started lifting a lot more, so that probably helped me too.
And that's the one thing I mentioned when releasing the top incoming freshmen is that I think, you know, you obviously filled out very well. How do you feel wrestling up at that kind of higher weight, being that you are younger? What's it been like for you wrestling some of those, you know, higher weights?
I mean, obviously, I'm going to wrestle mostly kids that are older than me, but I'm pretty used to it because I've always wrestled up in age. Like when I was 8 and under, I wrestled 9-10. When I was 9-10, I wrestled 11-12, 11-12 junior high, and so forth. So I'm pretty used to it, but it'll definitely be a little bit more of a challenge.
And it sounds like you're definitely up for the challenge, right?
Yeah.
Being that you're the top incoming freshman from this class, did you look at the list, and is there anyone on there that you were like, man, that guy's really good? Or this class, we always look back, and I remember one year we had Gavin Teasdale, Sammy Sasso, Gavin Hoffman, Michael Beard, all on the same list. When you look at this list, is there anyone in here particular that, I know you said like Panero Johnson, people on here that really stick out on the list for you?
Cole Spencer, I believe he's at number 4.
Yeah.
I grew up wrestling with him at OMP, so I'm excited that he got pretty high on the list. We stay in touch sometimes, and I'll probably train with him over the holidays and stuff like that.
And he's another guy that's sort of under the radar, I would say. A lot of people were asking me about him, and he sort of hit a little bit of a growth spurt too. And you guys are kind of close in weight now.
Yeah, he kind of blew up last year too. We wrestled a lot together last year.
Well, that's really good to hear. And as you said, your former teammate Panero Johnson and some other guys, and when you look back at the Cathedral Prep team, they're going to have a pretty solid team this year in the PIAA. Talk about just, I know you had mentioned about Bad Karma, but growing in that Cathedral Prep sort of program, how was that, and how did that focus you to really get better?
Cathedral Prep was good for me. I've been there I think last 3 years. They're a tough room to be in. Overall, there's a lot of good kids in that room, and they'll do really well this year. So it's a little bit hard moving away from there, but SEM was a better opportunity for me, so I had to come here.
And it sounds like already you're doing very well. You sound like you're maturing, and you're finding out what it's like to be on your own, and I'm sure you're adjusting well. And it sounds like you have a really good support staff around you. Can you talk a little bit about Coach Green and his coaching staff there? And it seems like they're more than just coaches. They're almost like parents for you and the team.
Yeah, we have I really like our coaching staff here. Coach Green kind of runs a lot of the practices. He's a guy that I can talk to about almost everything. One coach, Joe Ravelli, he lives right down the hall from my dorm. I can pretty much, I've gone up to him just about late at night to talk about whatever, if I just need help with homework, if I need help with, managing my weight, anything. He's always there to help me. Andre Bartlett, Bo's dad, he's really good to talk to about mentality and stuff like that. Coach Weber is really good to talk to about technique, weightlifting, stuff like that. So overall, our coaching staff is really strong.
Yeah, as you said, it just sounds like it's like almost a family dynamic. You can go to, each and every one of them to get support in different ways, and that's a pretty neat experience. So I think you're definitely in a good place to be and to have your wrestling and academic career really flourish for yourself. So we wish the best of luck to you, and we'll be seeing you in Ironman. So we look forward to seeing you compete in a week or so out in Ironman, and that's got to be a tournament that some of your family's going to be able to make the trip to. That's not too far away.
Yeah, most likely my mom and dad will come to that tournament, so I'm looking forward to that.
I'm sure Mark Steen will be there, and you won't hear him yelling at all in the corners. No, yeah. Right? He doesn't yell at all when he's coaching, so I'm pretty sure you won't hear him, but he'll be there in spirit watching. So maybe I might not hear him. Cole, well, we appreciate you stopping in and talking to us, and it's a really good hit to hear you and to talk a little bit about that experience of going to SEM and developing your skills. And again, we wish you the best of luck this season and in the future. So appreciate you taking the time out. All right, thank you. Thanks, Cole. Looking forward to seeing you. Thanks. All right. And I'm really happy we got to talk to Cole Rees. I mean, talk about a young man that's poised to do well. And, it's great to hear his perspective and, being named the top incoming freshman and being in a program like Wyoming Seminary. I'm excited to see this kid wrestle in the next few years.
Yeah, definitely. All these kids on the top incoming freshman report. And Jeff, just remind listeners how they can get their hands on the report and see all this great information that you've compiled.
Yeah, so you just go to PAPowerWrestling.com and you can click on top incoming freshmen in the top menu area. There's a nice big logo for the top incoming freshmen. You can view, there's 105 wrestlers. So there's top 75 and then 30 honorable mentions. So there's a whole lot of reading to do. It's going to take you a little bit, but it's all really good information. Obviously, PAPowerWrestling.com is where you're going to find all your wrestling needs. We are going to be coming out with preseason rankings next week. So we are going to be looking at who's to watch in these early weeks. We have a lot coming up. We're going to be doing another podcast before the season kicks off. And Eric, I don't know if I officially announced this or not, but we are doing a WPIAL podcast on the PA Power podcast. We're going to be doing a WPIAL focused podcast. My good friend and partner, Greg Warnock, who I did the MSA Sports Network with for a year or 2 years, I guess it was now. We are going to be doing our own WPIAL podcast, and it's going to be here available in the Matt Talk Network.
Yeah, that's pretty exciting stuff. I know you guys had been working on that for a few years together, so it's nice to be able to continue that and bring it home here to the Matt Talk Podcast Network.
Yeah, I'm really excited about that because obviously I'm super biased towards the WPIAL. That's all joking aside. Seriously, I'm not. But it's definitely something that we're excited for. So next week we'll have a lot for you in terms of preview for the season, but definitely check out our friends Mason Beckman and Tristan Warner. In fact, Eric Mason's going to cover his first college event this weekend. I'm very nervous.
And he might have an actual little bit of a bias
there's no question he does. He's going to Lehigh, Penn State on behalf of PA Power Wrestling to cover that duel, and it's definitely going to be an interesting experience for him. I can't wait to hear about it, but really excited for that. So when we're at Media Day at Johnstown, we'll be watching Penn State Lehigh compete, and Mason will be there giving you some updates on behalf of PA Power Wrestling. So great addition to the team. Still love him. We're always going to give him a hard time, but and same with Tristan, definitely going to give him a hard time, but two really good guys for us.
Absolutely. And again, Media Day, Pitt Johnstown, 1 to 4 p.m. on Sunday, December 3rd. Hopefully some listeners come on out. As far as teams go, it's not open to the public per se, but if you're a coach and want to bring a couple wrestlers by.
Absolutely, Eric. And as always, thank you for stopping in and listening to the PA Power Podcast. You can get all the information of Pennsylvania Wrestling on Facebook. Follow us on Twitter. Check us out on Instagram. And as always, go to PAPowerWrestling.com for all your wrestling needs. I'm Jeff Upson. Eric, it's been a good one. Thank you. That was weird. That was. Let's do that again. I know you gotta go. Eric, as always, tune to PA Power Wrestling for all your wrestling needs. Follow us on Twitter, friend us on Facebook, and check us out on Instagram. I'm Jeff Upson. Eric. Oh my God. Shit. All right. As always, check out PA Power Wrestling for all your wrestling needs. Like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, and check us out on Instagram. Until next time, fuck. Oh, this is like the Green Castle Atrium thing again. All right, hold on, stop. Let me compose myself. You got to go to work. Pressure's on. As always, you can tune to PAPowerWrestling.com for all your wrestling needs. Like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, and you can check us out on Instagram. Until next week, thanks for stopping in, PA Power Wrestling fans.